Hello, everybody. I hope everybody can hear me. Um, if you can't, again, please type in the chat window. So, thank you, Rituraj. As Rituraj said, today's webinar, we will provide you with an overview of the India Lab and its progress so far. And then shortly, we'll turn to the main topic of the webinar, which is how to submit ideas to the lab. And we'll conclude with an opportunity for you to ask questions. But if you have questions during the webinar itself, please feel free to type them in the chat window and we'll take them up towards the question answer session towards the end. So today's agenda for the webinar is essentially I will provide you with a brief background and overview. Then, as I said, we'll talk about how to submit ideas and finally we'll take questions. So the background to the India Lab. If, as you all know, India has aggressive INDCs that were announced recently in October and again reaffirmed during the COP in Paris. We are essentially committing to about 30% reduction in carbon intensity between 2005 and 2030. And a lot of that hinges on India generating about 20% of its electricity from renewables, which corresponds to around 40% of generating capacity. The Indian government has seized the renewable energy as a strategic priority in order to essentially it's seen as a silver bullet because it addresses multiple issues like local air pollution, climate change. Also, it's seen as a solution to energy access, and finally, it provides energy security by reducing import of volatile fossil fuels. And as you all know, India has set ambitious renewable energy growth targets. For example, 160 gigawatts of renewable energy by 2022, including utility scale, rooftop, and 3 gigawatts of off-grid solar. And a key part of this India reaching its target would be a very, very high level and comprehensive private sector participation, which will be essential because the government is expecting to raise approximately USD $100 billion or even more to meet these targets. And there are commitments, as you see in RE Invest last year, there were commitments. A significant portion of that commitment is also becoming active. But this reaching this target through private sector participation faces challenges. You hear of these challenges. For example, domestic banks are nearing exposure limits in the power sector. Um, Domestic capital markets are underdeveloped and dominated by government borrowing. And also, finally, for foreign capital, hedging costs are prohibitively high. Um, and now we also hear that given the solar bids, equity is starting to become a problem. Now, that is an issue, as I discussed, is with availability of capital. But combined with that issue, um, one major issue, as we have discovered through our work, is that renewable energy in India is more expensive than it needs to be. Um, in one of our papers, we compared the cost of renewable energy in India to other developed countries, and what we found was that beyond the availability of debt, cost of debt and terms of debt are also a problem, and when combined, they add to approximately 30% of the cost of renewable energy. So what it tells us is that eventually we need more capital, but we also need more capital at attractive terms, and that's where the lab comes in. Um, the India Innovation Lab for Green Finance has been developed in response to this need and this need for attractive finance, which will flow through appropriate investment vehicles. So essentially, what the lab is doing is looking at developing better investment vehicles for green infrastructure. And the idea is to identify, develop, and accelerate innovative solutions to finance green infrastructure, which obviously include renewable energy of all kinds, utility scale, distributed, and off grid. but also energy efficiency, urbanization, and other channels for green growth. The three pillars of the India Lab are innovation, analysis, and action. The first one, innovation. The India Lab will crowdsource ideas to find innovative solutions to problems such as access to finance, cost of finance, and risk management. The lab fosters innovation through its collaborative approach. Second, the India Lab will put these ideas through rigorous analysis from the lab itself, but also through its members, who are key stakeholders from the public and private sector. And it will help assess and develop instrument design and implementation plans for a short list of successful ideas with input from these key stakeholders. And third, which is also key beyond innovation and in-depth analysis, is this need for action. And the idea is that the India Lab will move these instruments from idea to action. It will help accelerate successful ideas by continuing to provide analytical support and help design implementation plans. And by facilitating outreach and dialogue between idea proponents and implementers with potential funders or supporters and other relevant stakeholders and domain experts. The India Innovation Lab, as I mentioned, is a key feature is that it's not um, managed primarily by CPI. It involves a wide range of stakeholders. It's the India Innovation Lab is essentially basically represented by its members, and these members come from government, finance, renewable energy, and infrastructure sectors. And the lab will draw on the guidance of these members who have deep expertise and experience in the political, financial, and technical facets of clean growth. Um, and this number is changing on a daily basis. We are now represented by approximately 20 institutions. We have three mentors from MNRE, which is Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, Ministry of Finance, as well as Niti Aayog. We have three funders who are also members: Shakti Foundation, Packard, and Packard Foundation, and the UK government, and then 15 organizations from the finance and the clean and slash green infrastructure sectors. The Ministry of New and Renewable Energy is a key stakeholder. They have endorsed the India Lab, and they'll remain a key stakeholder. MNRE, primarily through the Joint Secretary, Mr. Kapoor, will participate in the India Lab meeting, but it has also had wide support from Secretary Mr. Tripathi. Um, and these guys, both of them will participate in our continuing lab meetings as well as dialogue to make sure that there is alignment between India Lab's objectives and MNR's objectives, which are aligned at this point, that they stay aligned. And they will also guide the India Lab progression towards a larger goal of national targets. As I mentioned, India Lab is funded by Shakti Foundation, but Shakti Foundation also plays a very key role of the host of the India Lab, which is key in terms of connecting to key stakeholders and convening these key stakeholders together, and also ensuring that all the stakeholders participate on a regular basis in this very key initiative. The role that we play as Climate Policy Initiative is as the lab secretariat, which manages the lab at a strategic as well as an administrative level, as guided by the funders. But we also play the part of the analytical provider, which provides analytical support in the design and pilot phases. So moving forward, just to give you a sense of what the different phases are going to be, the India Lab, the main idea is that we will have annual cycles with approximately three phases, and the beginning of the annual cycle, we will have a call for ideas, and at the end of that annual cycle, we have uh, we are hoping and we are very confident, and I'll tell you in a few minutes why, that we will have actual pilots that are working on ground. So let me just walk you through this essentially what the process is going to be of what the three phases are. And before I even do that, I want to make sure that we understand who are the key proponents, or sorry, key stakeholders, beyond the members, beyond the mentors, beyond funders, and also, as I said, the lab secretariat. A key stakeholder in this process is a proponent of an idea, the proponent who would not only submit an idea but will also have some skin in the game to work with us in developing the idea and taking them to pilots. And these proponents are what we are reaching out to today in our call for ideas. So I want to acknowledge that you are the ones who are going to start the process, with the rest of the stakeholder groups being the supportive cast for the proponent in taking their innovative ideas to completion and to pilots. So, just to kind of walk through the three phases, in the phase one, which we call the call for ideas, which we are going through right now, the call for ideas opened end of November. It will end on January 8th. So we are right in the middle of it. And the main kind of focus of the call for ideas is that we're looking for new idea submissions that are submitted by proponents. And proponents, if you see, they are in the yellow box or the orange box. And we are hoping that many of them we talked to in our India Lab reception 2 days ago. We are hoping that many of you are on the call today, and will be able to answer many of the remaining questions you might have. But we're hoping to get submissions from each one of you. Once the submission is submitted, what we'll do is we'll screen the submission for a completeness check, and the lab member, with help from the secretariat, will select from the submission a short list of ideas, and we're hoping that we'll select up to 4 ideas to move to phase two, which will be the instrument design phase. And you can also see the timelines, the tentative timelines on these phases at the top, with the phase one being going on right now until January, phase two from February to May, June, and Feb 3, which is the pilots, from June 2016 and ongoing. Coming back to phase two, in the instrument design, we will set up collaborative working groups who will consist of the members and the team from the secretariat team, but as well as other experts that we will reach out on a selective basis, on a need basis. And the idea is here in the design phase is to refine and stress test the ideas against the market and the risk framework that will be that the instruments will face. And so the basic idea is to ensure that the instrument is designed well to work in the Indian context. The Secretariat will analyze the ideas against a preset list of analytical questions, and we will also develop milestones and implementation plans for would-be implementers to take up. And this is where there's a nuance about the implementer could potentially be different from the proponent. The implementers could be proponent. We'd like them to be proponents because that's where you will have longer engagement. But it is also possible that implementers could be different from proponents. The idea proponents, of course, will be invited to participate in the working groups, and we will work in a kind of a virtual manner through an online platform where ongoing refinements and analysis will be provided on the idea. Now, what will happen at the end of the phase two is we'll have another members meeting to endorse the lab instrument, and this is a key milestone where we will attempt and try and hope to invite a lot of funders who obviously are members themselves, but their contacts and as well as the wider network we have, to look at the ideas that are being endorsed by the lab. And then this is where we start looking for funding for the ideas that have been developed, funding whether it's coming from public sources or private sources. And the India Lab will facilitate outreach and dialogue between potential funders as well as the pilot implementers. And then in the process, making sure the pilots have the best chance of success. Also in the period, the Secretariat will be available to provide analytical support, or what we call ongoing analytical support. Beyond phase three, we hope to stay engaged in the process of these pilots becoming a success in the marketplace and going to scale. And there'll be components of ongoing analytical support, measurement and verification of how well these instruments are doing, as well as continued the lab will continue to stay engaged in the process of these pilots becoming success at a large scale. Moving to the next slide, that there is this always a question of how do you know the India lab will be successful. And the question is, we have to see whether the India lab will be successful in the Indian context. But we are confident, and we are confident that it will be successful because we have been running something similar in the global context, and it's called the Global Innovation Lab for Climate Finance. So these labs are, in some sense, the India Lab is a sister initiative to the Global Lab, and the Global Lab has already run through its first annual cycle, and it's going through its second annual cycle. And as we build, the India Lab, we will learn from our sister initiative, but we'll also build on top of that by adapting the unique challenges and opportunities of India. Just to give you a sense of the success of the global lab, it's being endorsed by the G7 countries, and it's raised about $500 million in initial funding for the 4 pilots that came out of the global lab, and many of these pilots could have potential implementation or applications to India. For example, a long-term currency swap to address the issue of currency hedging, or the energy savings insurance product to guarantee the technical performance of an energy efficiency upgrade. So we are very, very proud that the global lab is getting a lot of attention, and not only attention, but also it has shown that an idea like this can work in practice. Now, coming to the idea submission, and walking through some of the key components of the idea submission. If you are on this call, most likely you've seen the the ideas page with the guidelines, and also a template, a PowerPoint template that you could use to um, essentially submit your ideas. But there's a question as to why you should submit an idea, and what kind of help you're getting from the lab, from the India lab. So obviously, the first answer to that is that we need innovative financial instruments, and we are looking for the wider community to help out. We're thinking about innovative and new ideas to channel the huge target that the Indian government has set itself towards. But also, we are very, very confident, as I said, or we are highly confident that given the success of the global lab, which we hope to replicate in India, there is positive signs of us helping raise funding from different sources, including public and private sources. And finally, the crux is that we help, um, you know, help the proponents with the design, and we provide guidance. And it's not just the India Lab Secretariat, but as I said, the members, the collective wisdom, the collective expertise of these members, who are pretty wide ranging, would be very, very helpful um, to the proponents. So what my call for you is that we need help from you. We need ideas from you. And if you are submitting an idea, that's great. Please do get in touch with us before the deadline, because we want to hear from you now. But we would also appreciate it if you could forward this email to maybe your friends, your network, where you think there could be interest in submitting an idea. So how does coming to the next thing, about once you submitted an idea, or in the process of submitting an idea, what are the key steps here, and what you should watch out for? So as most of you must have seen, the process is administered through the India Lab website, and I will put up the links again, but the links are in all the emails we send out. Before submitting an idea, if you're thinking about submitting an idea, I've already asked you, please let us know. It's very important that we are in touch, even before the deadline. But then we also recommend that you identify the purposes and objectives of your idea and how it might be implemented. It is also important to review the India Lab guidelines and principles of engagement, which are also on the ideas page, and just to understand how the process works and how everything fits together and how the ideas might be evaluated. Um, Now, once the ideas are submitted through the idea submission form, and we're hoping that by January 8th, we'll have a lot of ideas, we in January and part of February, we will be screening as the lab secretariat these ideas against key criteria that I'll talk about in a second. Um, and these criteria are being developed right now, and they'll be further refined with the help of the lab members. And the list of the ideas or the criteria is essentially listed here, which is transformative, innovative, catalytic, and actionable. And I'll actually walk you through each of these criteria to understand what do they really mean. So that will be our next slide. Um, we essentially have, if you have seen the PowerPoint, we have essentially 5 sections. And what I'll do is I'll introduce you to the main points of each one of them. Um, and and I want to stress that we need this screening criteria to make sure that you have thought through your idea so that we can actually assess how well, how ready this idea is to be taken through the lab. So it will require some work from you as well. In the overview section, we have a number of basic questions that should indicate the types of instruments used, the investors targeted, and the sector targeted. In the idea description section, we're looking for a clear link between the problem and the solution identified, the type of implementing organization and other stakeholders that may be involved. The screening criteria applied here is that it does indeed, or does the idea indeed relate to a green infrastructure solution, and if there is a sense of a type of implementing organization or the actual implementing organizations are identified. Um, Moving on to the next criteria, which is transformative. We evaluate if the idea can be transformative, and that is essentially whether the idea can be replicated at scale to have a transformative impact on India's green growth. And we are essentially looking for things like if the idea can be implemented at scale, what is the potential of the idea to affect India's green growth goals, or outline benefits of the idea in socioeconomic and environmental terms, and the replicability of the idea in other sectors or countries. And the screening criteria that we'll apply here is to see if green growth is affected and at what scale. We'll also check to see if it's possible that the idea can be replicated, as I mentioned earlier, and it's not too context specific. Moving forward to the next criteria, which we call innovative. By innovative, what we mean is that is the idea innovative relative to the barriers that the idea is trying to address. And these barriers essentially are obviously related to the green infrastructure sector that the idea is applying to in the beginning. And how would the idea overcome these barriers directly or indirectly? And is there evidence of why the barriers exist and how they could be overcome with ideas similar to yours? In the innovation section, we're essentially looking for more detail on existing barriers in the context the idea will operate in, and why, in comparison to existing approaches, this is new or an improved way to addressing these barriers. The screening criteria that will be applied is whether it's indeed a new idea or approach, or is it an existing idea that's being done in a new context. So that's also important. Innovation does not have to be always a new idea. Innovation could be an existing idea that's applied to a new context, to a new market, to a new sector. So we will be open to innovation of different kinds. Okay, the next screening criteria is what we call catalytic, and the idea behind that is the idea, or what is the potential of the idea to catalyze or engage private green infrastructure finance at scale, identified through market growth opportunity or investment potential. We are essentially looking for estimates on the levels of private finance that can be mobilized, first in terms of a pilot and second in terms of an overall size of the market. And the screening criteria that's applied is simply whether there's potential of private finance leverage identified and not just a specific number. That's just a potential. So we're essentially looking at what's the total market size as well as the potential to leverage public sector money in case public sector money is required to implement the idea. And finally, which is very important in in the in the Indian context, and this is where I think we differentiate ourselves in some sense from the global lab, is that since we are India specific, we would like to be able to make sure that the idea works in India to begin with, right? Which the global lab doesn't have given its global focus, and so that's a key differentiating factor. And here, the idea proponent should indicate the type of organization that would be an implementer. Would it be a bank? Would it be a private company? Would it be an industry association? And so that leaves open the the option of multiple organizations submitting an idea together, and the time frame to implementation along with a set of milestones. So you can see that we're kind of trying to make you think about how you'll actually get it done. Any implementation challenges or risks should be identified. Idea proponents should also indicate that if they wish to implement a pilot, or would they be willing, or would they be looking for an implementing agency that they themselves have identified, or they would need the India lab to help them with. In the actionable section, we are looking for clarity on what is needed to implement the idea, the new policy. Are there new policy legislation required um, to be passed for the ideas to work? And if so, are they being currently planned by our country? What are the risks in implementing the idea, and what are the key milestones as required to realize the pilot? The key screening criteria here is, and this is where we'll have to be somewhat subjective in assessing whether the idea needs a new regulation, and how what is the feasibility of a new regulation, and that will have to be assessed as we go along. Again, it's important to remember that we just need the screening criteria to progress a submission to the list, to a long list that will be submitting to the members, who will then decide on which ideas go to the phase two. If every aspect of an idea is not worked out, that's okay, as long as the screening criteria is met. So that pretty much finishes my talk, or the web of the the content part. I again want to iterate on how the ideas would be submitted. Essentially, please do visit the ideas webpage of the Green Finance Lab. It's called the greenfinancelab.in. Review the guidelines for idea and download the submission form, and then email completed submissions to info@greenfinancelab.in. And as I said earlier, please do let us know even before you submit an idea if you're thinking of submitting an idea, and please let us know if you need help in completing submissions. Finally, as I said earlier, the deadline is January 8th by end of the day, 11:59 p.m. With this, let me conclude the presentation. I also want to thank you all for your attention. Now it's your turn, and we look forward to receiving your questions. If you would like to ask a question, please type your question in the chat window. We'll wait a minute or two to collect questions, and then in a couple of minutes, it's around 10:45, around 10:47 or so, I will start answering the questions we have picked up in the process. So please go ahead and type in your questions in the chat window. Thank you very much. Okay, so I will get started in answering the questions that have come up so far. The first question was related to the relationship to the global lab, and if one if a proponent has a choice of submitting ideas to the global lab versus the India lab. So obviously there is a choice. The global lab, by the way, the second cycle, the idea submission has already closed. So they are already engaged in their second cycle. So therefore, at this time, if you have an idea that's India specific, your best choice is the India lab. And in the next cycles or the next set of cycles, we because we hope this initiatives to continue for a longer time frame. Um, we would encourage you, if your idea is specific to a country, especially if the idea is specific to the India lab, that you submit it to the India lab. But essentially, at the end of the day, that's your choice as to where you want to go. But just to kind of complete that answer, currently the only choice is the India lab because the global lab submission cycle or the phase is closed. The next question was if the idea is conceptualized but not fully ready for submission, would it be possible that the lab secretariat will assist in developing the idea for submission? And to answer to that is we are relying on the proponents to develop the ideas. We are happy to provide assistance that is more of an administrative type, where we are letting you know if what you're thinking is or what where your idea is ready for submission. But at this point, our expectation is the proponents are the ones who will be developing the ideas. Having said that, we are more than open to having discussions, informal discussions on providing feedback to suitable proponents or proponents who reach out to us directly. And therefore, I have, as I mentioned, we encourage you to write to us on the email that we have provided, the info email, and we'll be happy to work with you to see that your idea does get submitted. Um, the next question I see is that can the idea provider be an implementer, or will it be up to the lab to choose the implementer best suited for the idea? Now, our initial kind of response to that is that it is best that the proponent is also an implementer, because that ensures longer term engagement between this entity or this individual and the lab. However, as we go through the process, I think we will collectively determine if we need to bring in other parties, other implementers who may be better suited, if it is realized that the proponent is not fulfilling all the requirements. But at the end of the day, we want the proponents to stay engaged and be part of the implementation in some manner. The next question was, do you have a gamut of topics that you want to address? For example, in the beginning, when we talked about the currency hedging, um, we are the answer to that is that we are open to a wide range of ideas. So we are not looking for specific ideas. The examples are good to start with, and beyond currency hedging, we can talk about other ideas. Just to give you a sense, I could, we could be looking at maybe development of yield curves in India, or looking at credit enhancement techniques, looking at energy access funds. But at the end of the day, we are looking at innovative instruments that will enable the demonstration of to add this, to end see down, for example, the huge target that India faces of 40 gigawatts. Ooh, they can't hear me anymore. Hello, can you hear? They lost me, or which answer they lost me, so I can go back and repeat. Okay, great. So it was still the current question about the gamut of topics, and the brief answer to that is we are looking at a wide range of topics. We are not focused on any specific topic as such. It could be wide ranging from in the sectors, utility scale renewables to off grid renewables to energy efficiency to urbanization. Maybe there is a great idea on municipal bonds or a fund of funds. So we want to stay open, but obviously, there are a lot of examples. Okay. The next question was about the idea. Does the idea have to contain a pilot? The answer is yes. We are hoping the idea will become a pilot. So we hope that we are the ones doing the pilot with the proponents and the implementers, and that is a key component. But if we are not able to answer this question, please do reach out and informally. Yes. Then the next question is about proprietary information, and that's a sensitive question, and you know the answer is that we will respect proprietary information. So it is up to the proponent, it is up to the implementer on how much they want to share. Um, we we are there to help in any way we can to make it happen. But if there is proprietary information that certain agencies want to not share, we'll be very respectful of that. Okay. Replicability. Okay. Um, and one of the issue with the proprietary information may be that how would we replicate and how do we assess replicability? But at the end of the day, we have to work very closely with the proponents and the implementers. There is a question about range of ticket size uh, and the time frame for pilot implementation. So we are not limiting ourselves to the range of ticket size per idea. We do, as I said, want to look at how catalytic the instrument is. So we want to be able to assess and catalytic or transformative, but it will depend on the sector. If you're applying for an off-grid energy idea versus an utility scale idea, obviously the numbers are going to be different, and that's an assessment that will be made through the lab members, through the discussions that we have within the lab. The next question was the lab members can also submit ideas, and then does it have an issue if they are also involved in shortlisting the ideas as well? And the answer to that is yes, lab members can submit ideas and they will be involved in shortlisting ideas, but we are aware of this potential conflict of interest. So we are designing selection criteria in a way and the voting procedures that we'll use to address this issue of conflict of interest. The next question came and it asked about whether there is a fee for being part of the lab, and the answer is no. There are no requirements of any type of monetary type at this point, and that is why it was important for us, for our functioning, to get funding from funding from a separate source of objective or neutral funders. So the lab is self-funded and it does not need any funding. What we are asking you is, as a proponent or implementing agency, or even from the members that you do participate with your time. If you're a proponent or an implementer, we're looking for more time engagement. We'll be very happy to work with you, and so with the members. Um, there was also a question which I might have answered before. It is the question was about, is it possible for individuals who are not affiliated with any organization to submit ideas? Um, it's definitely possible. It's definitely possible. We will look at all kinds of ideas that are submitted, but at the end of the day, we will also look at mm, the identification of, as we mentioned, implementers. So even if you're an individual submitting an idea, we want you to think about who could be implementing agencies, who are the likely implementing agencies that they would like to work with, and then the lab will facilitate that process as well. Um, Now I'm seeing there are no longer any new questions coming in, so I will give it another few seconds to take more questions if you have more questions. Um, and and we are also getting close to the hour, but would love to get more questions. If there are any remaining, we'll take maybe a couple of more questions if there are. I just got one more questions, and the question says, could you mention if there is any time frame to the piloting being proposed? And totally. So as I mentioned, as we go through the phases, the first phase is the screening phase and the idea submission phase. That's the 4 months until January. Then the next phase is the design phase, where we're helping you design and finalizing the design of the submitted instrument. That goes until May or June. And then the third phase, is the pilot phase. So we hope and truly believe that we would like to have a pilot or pilots coming out at the end of the first cycle, which will be ending in October. So essentially, at the end of the annual cycle, we hope to see pilots. The next question is, what is the total amount of funds available for implementation of ideas in the first cycle? And I'm not sure what this question means, but I'll have my best guess in that. The lab is not promising any funds. The lab will help you raise funds at the end of phase two. So, and as I said, the lab is helping in many different ways by helping analyze and design ideas. It's also putting a stamp of approval or endorsement from a wide stakeholder community. And in the process, at the end of phase two, will also, at the when the design is complete, bring these ideas to potential funders to get them funded, and help you through the pilot phase in raising funds, especially from the public sector as well as the private sector. The next question is, there a set period beyond which the pilot cannot extend if you are expected to be commissioned around October at the end of the cycle? And the answer to that is, not really. I mean, and if you saw my slide on the three phases, and you could see the pilots can definitely extend beyond the first cycle, and we recognize that pilots could extend beyond the first cycle. But the main thing is that we, in the pilot phase, we are truly focused on making the pilots work and getting to them in a shape that they're getting closer to reality. But we are very aware that the piloting may take longer than the first cycle, and we hope to stay associated. And just to give you an idea, the pilots that came out of the Global Lab first cycle, which essentially ended in August, are still being developed. So there is no danger of an idea being abandoned. And this is where we'll stay with you throughout the pilot getting implemented, as well as, hopefully we'll also get it to scale together over long term. That is our hope. So I'm not seeing any more questions. There's one more coming in. Yeah. All right. So, I'm not getting any more questions. We received some great questions, and I hope we were able to answer them. If you still have questions, if you still need help, if you still have clarifications, please do write to us at info@, greenfinancelab.in, and we'll be very happy to hear from you. As I said earlier on, even if you're thinking of submitting an idea, please do get in touch with us so that we know the idea is coming and we can work with you in making the idea submission happen. And as Mr. Shiva Rajamani said in his question, uh, this is we are in it for the long term. So, we're looking forward to be associated with you in the long term in getting these great ideas to pilots, but also getting them to scale. So thank you very much for joining, and we hope to be in touch. Thank you very much. Bye for now.